Okay, today we're going to talk about the next in the 67 steps, the 67 mental frameworks to bring you success, to bring you to bring you in life whatever it is that you're seeking. And this one I call blue-footed booby birds, ESS, and the 500-year-old mind. Now, that's a loaded kind of topic, so we're going to talk about this. Let me explain how this is relevant to you today. Now, let me just say a little caveat before we start. We're going to talk a little bit about evolution. That's a controversial subject for many people. This is not a religious conversation. I'm not trying to say that I know the answers. We're going to just take the things that are relevant to you in business and in life today. We're going to take the best of every great teacher. Okay? Doesn't mean you have to agree with everything. In fact, I've never met somebody, a person, a human, that's infallible. But we still learn from all of them. So Charles Darwin in the 1800s was traveling. I went to the Galapagos Islands, a famous trip, and one of the species he found were these blue-footed booby birds. And these were the beginnings of him formulating this concept of what? What is it really that he said? Because of course things have been taken out of context and changed over the centuries. But what he really said is best summarized, and I want to read you this because this is so relevant, by a professor named Megginson. Professor Megginson, and he was talking about Darwin, and he said, yes, change is the basic law of nature, but the changes wrought by the passage of time affect individuals and institutions in different ways. Now listen to this. He says, according to Charles Darwin's Origin of Species, it is not the most intellectual of the species that survives. It is not the strongest that survives, but the species that survives is the one that is best able to adapt and adjust to the changing environment in which it finds itself. Applying this theoretical concept to us as individuals, we can state that the civilization that is able to survive is the one that is best able to adapt to the changing physical, social, political, moral, and spiritual environment in which it finds himself. Megginson wrote this in around 1963 in a lecture he did on lessons from Europe for American business. Now, blue-footed booby birds, Charles Darwin. What does this mean to you? Well, it's very simple. This is a very liberating message. What science and found, and I'm sure you've seen this in your own experience, it is not the most intellectual that win. Think back when you were in high school. Is the valedictorian of your high school class necessarily the most successful today? No, it's rarely that way. Megginson, talking on Darwin, says it's not the strongest that survives. Think back. It's the captain of the football team, the best player in basketball and sports, soccer. Is that person the person who best survives and thrives as they get older? No, not necessarily. In fact, it's the intangibles. Warren Buffett spoke on this when he spoke to a group of MBA students. You can see it on YouTube. I refer to it a lot. I'll try to put a link here on the page if you're watching this on my site or listening to this on my site to that YouTube talk. And same thing, it's these intangibles. And for us today, what I want to focus on this particular step on 67 steps, and this one we're talking about today is again one of these fundamental foundational ones. You have to get this right, or I can tell you this, you're not going anywhere quickly. You're not going anywhere with impact if you cannot master this. We're going to talk about some examples. So the liberating message for you is, I don't care what your IQ is, and I don't care your strength. That's not what's going to cut it to get what it is, whatever it is you want out of life. You must be adaptable. You must be changeable. Now, remember this title talks about ESS and the 500-year-old mind? Well, you and I, unfortunately, have been literally hardwired to not be successful. And that's why, 1% of the world runs the world. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but that is in great part the reason that you haven't gotten what you wanted out of life. You have not been changeable enough. You have not been adaptable enough. You have not read the signs and seen the circumstances change and moved on a dime. I mean, think about it. Let's just think. Have you ever been in a job where the signs were obvious pretty early on that you should move on to do something else, but you stayed longer than you should? Have you ever been in a friendship with somebody where there were signs that it might not turn out to be the best relationship, but you stayed in it too long? Have you ever had a dating or marriage relationship where you stayed with somebody and the signs were there, but you ignored them? You were not changeable. It's not just changeable for the sake of changing, notice. It's adaption. What does adaption apply? It means reading external stimulus that comes to you. You're dating someone. The stimulus is, hey, this person does some things that I don't like to other people. And then you use projection, which is, if you read Richard Dawkins, the great biologist, he talks about our mind is hardwired and very rare. No other animal can project into the future like we can. So you project in the future. If that person does this to that person, they might do it to me. And then you get out of that situation, that marriage, that relationship before it's too late. But no, you and I'm sure, I know about myself, and I'm sure if you're honest with yourself, this has been a key and prime reason why you have wasted months, weeks, decades, years of your life in something that you should have changed and adapted out of much quicker. Now, of course, you can change too quickly and not give things a chance. But that I'm not talking about movement for the sake of movement. I'm talking about adaptability. Most of us have been, remember I said we've been lied to? I don't mean that in a cheesy way. Legitimately, we live in a society that pushes strength and IQ as the fundamentals to success. And at some level, it is true. There are correlations between high IQs. For example, most billionaires have extremely high IQs. But you're not necessarily listening to this because you want to become a billionaire. That's a pretty big home run to hit with your life. But let's say your goal is just to become a millionaire. Well, if you read The Millionaire Next Door, that well-known book, and various surveys and research done on millionaires, the average millionaire in the United States, for example, does not have an extremely high IQ. They have above average, and I'm sure you're above average if you're just listening to this. But like Warren Buffett says, if your IQ is over 130, you could sell the excess. You don't really need it to be a good investor and to be successful in business. It's the same in life. Life does not go to people with single strong attributes. Same with strength. You see the media pushes on us this idea that it's the tallest, there's even studies out there that taller people do better, but those studies are pretty skewed. If you look deeper, it's not necessarily because of the height. It's because of other socioeconomic factors. So even those studies are very flawed. No, what Megginson and Darwin were saying, and Darwin, like I said, whether or not you believe with everything, I think almost anybody on the planet today, even very conservative religious people, would believe in adaptability and that there's been changeability and variability in societies and species over the centuries. I mean, the Sherpas in the Himalayan mountains, the people that carry, when people trek to the top of Mount Everest, they bring these Sherpas. Well, those Sherpas moved in about in the 1500s, moved to the Himalayas from other lower areas, and over the last 500 years, they've adapted and changed their lung capacity. I was in Bolivia when I was younger, in my early 20s, and I went and it was great. I was there in La Paz, Bolivia, highest capital city in the world, and we went to Potosi, which is the highest large city in the world. I think we're at 12, 14,000, something like that, 30, 14, 15,000 feet. And it's hard to breathe up there, but the body of those people born there has adapted. So there's an adaptation that happens over time biologically, but remember, you don't have generations to change and adapt slowly, right? You have one life and you have a certain amount of years, and we don't know how many of those years are. So the point of the 67 steps is I want to get you aware and focus that whatever your adaptability rate is, let's say you read the signs and it takes you 6 months to really go figure out a situation and be like, well, I don't know if I want to be in this situation. Well, you need to cut that to 3 months. And if it takes you a year, you need to cut that, because the speed with which you can adapt and evolve is the speed with which you will get whatever it is that you want out of life. Now remember, I said, from a young age, we've been pre-programmed, not with the tools that will bring us success, but everything that you and I learned opposes this speed of adaptability. Let me give you some examples. One of the things is that we have what I call the 500-year-old mind. It's been pushed on you and it's been pushed on me. Whether or not you consider yourselves a highly enlightened person, modern person, I guarantee you, you are carrying the vestiges, okay, of ancient thought, invalid thought. So 500, 600, 700 years ago, people came and said, hey, the world's not flat. Hey, the earth is not the center of the universe. And you know what happened? The powers that were at that time, they came and literally said, if you don't take that back, we're going to kill you. We're going to excommunicate you. We're going to burn you to the ground. And so those people had to recant and say, no, 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 we didn't mean that. See, at that time in the world was understood in black and white. To say that the world was, the earth was not the center of the universe was to challenge the thoughts of the day, whether they be religious or institutional thoughts. And so you and I, in the same way, even today, that mentality is not dead. It has carried over, and you and I have been taught to see everything black and white. And the second you see everything black and white is the second you violate what Megison and Charles Darwin said about the ability to adapt. The second you think it's wrong to do X instead of Y, because you have some moral black and white. And I'm not talking, by the way, there are rules and morality and ethics that should be upheld. I'm not saying there's no rules to life. We shouldn't kill puppies, and we should be kind, and those common things that are those altruistic traits that are in all of us should not be messed with. I'm saying we shouldn't take it too far. An interesting fact about Sam Walton, who's many ways the best businessman maybe of all time, but he made $160 billion personally when he was building Walmart, and built one of the largest company, for good or bad, that changed the world. But very powerful and effective man. What made him so effective? Well, when he died, one of his friends, if you haven't read the book, it's one of the required reading books that I have for everybody who's in my programs, and it's called Made in America by Sam Walton. It's a $5 book, and one of his friends, after he passed away, said about Sam Walton, I've never met a man that was less afraid to fail. He would just shake it off and move on to the next thing. I'm reading The Everything Store, which is a book about Jeff Bezos, the man who built Amazon.com, I think he's worth $40 billion, built one of the companies that's changed the world and how we buy things. Same thing. He was unfazed because, you know why? He came from a standpoint unlike you and I. He didn't see failure as black and white like we did. We had reinforcement in school through grade system. And I'm not opposed necessarily to giving kids grades. I am opposed to the general spirit of pushing on people that everything is always going to be a pass or fail. What if the school system had taught you and I something different, which is what I'm proposing you begin to train yourself now? What if we had been trained like Thomas Edison? Thomas Edison died one of the wealthiest men in the world, and more important than his wealth, he helped and changed the world more than almost any person on the planet. And how did he do that? Well, he died with, I think, 1,000 or 1,100 patents. Patents on all types of things, from music recording to stock tickers to patents on electricity. All these fundamental tools that we use today started the company that's still around now. At one time, it was the largest company in the world, GE. I used to work for GE Capital. When I worked there, it was the largest company in the world. The only company still from the original, I think, Dow Jones Industrials, when the stock market started in the late 1800s. Still around. What did this man do right? He did a lot of things right. Well, he says, he said, I make more mistakes than anyone, and I end up patenting them all. I read somewhere, don't quote me on this exactly, but I think he said it took him about 1,000 failures, in experiment failures, so to speak. It's funny that in English we don't even have a better word for this. we still call it failures. Like, why is an experiment a failure? An experiment's moving you towards a goal. All there is in life is your goal, which is, I'm sure, why you're here listening to me today, this 67 steps, you're moving towards a goal. So along the way, as long as something moves you forward towards that goal, it can't be a mistake or a failure. It's an experiment. So the way that this Edison mind worked, and this is the same thing Darwin was talking about, was instead of seeing things in black and white, like, oh, I launched this business and it failed, see it as I launched this business as an experiment, and it moved me towards the goal, and I got out of it quick enough when the signs weren't there, and I adapted, and I used that experience, and I morphed it and those connections, and maybe a little money I made, and I morphed it into the next version of myself. And it's a continual adaptation. And this is the new way to think about life. I don't want you to think about life anymore in the black and white of the 500-year-old mind. I don't want you to be one of those people judging yourself like they judged those scientists 500, 600, 700 years ago who said the world is not flat, the world is round. Too many of us literally sit in judgment on ourselves. We are not only the person presenting the concept, but we're the judge and the tribunal against ourselves. People beat themselves up. I read the story of Colonel Sanders. It's a great book. If you look on my book recommendation, I have the link. He wrote an autobiography when he was, I think, 84 or 79 or something. Fascinating. The man started more businesses than almost anybody. I mean, he ran away from home at 12 years old, began to work, had a 6th grade education. But you know what? He was continually adapting, changing, became a lawyer. He ended up in the Spanish-American War. He owned a gas station. He owned hotels. He, of course, eventually had developed this chicken, which at age 65, he turned into a business called Kentucky Fried Chicken, which went on to be the largest franchise in the world until McDonald's really grew. I think he even helped McDonald's, Ray A. Kroc. And now I think Kentucky Fried Chicken is whatever, the 2nd largest franchise in the world. Now, the food's not great, it's junky and so on. But the lessons, like I said, we don't have to learn from perfect people. There are no perfect people. We can learn from Colonel Sanders. And what do you learn? Well, the man didn't see his life in black and white. He saw his life in adaptability. Most of us, myself included, had I gone through 10 or 12 failed businesses, my conclusion, my tribunal judgment on myself would be black and white. Ty's not good at business. Whereas Colonel Sanders was more like understood things in the blue-footed, booby bird, Darwinian adaptability framework. He's just like, it's just me changing. That's amazing. Think of what Edison said. I make more mistakes than anybody, and I end up patenting most of them. He had flipped and reversed this black and white 500-year-old false mentality of, oh, this is black. I did a good job this time. Don't even say you did a good job. Don't sit, remember, black and white. So don't always commend yourself. People, myself included, I think back at times where I thought I succeeded. Well, we don't know. It takes a little while. There was a famous historian a few years ago asked what he thought the repercussions of the Franco-Prussian War or of the French Revolution were. And remember, the French Revolution was centuries ago. And he said, it's too early to tell. What he was saying is, it's very hard to sit in judgment on things. So stop judging yourself. Now, like I said, I do believe some things are black and white. Okay? There are some things that are black and white. I'm not talking about a completely subjective understanding of morality. I'm talking about success. Remember, you're listening to me today not because I'm giving you, the answers to everything in life. I don't have the answers to everything in life. I can't tell you many things. You will have to find those answers from somebody else. I'm not talking about what happens to us after we die, and I'm not talking about morality in the sense of, this big picture cosmological kind of question. What I'm talking about is today, and what I promised you in this 67 steps, is to get you the success in a certain area. For some of you, it's money. For some of you, it's changing your body. For some of you, it's love. For some of you, it's finding fulfillment and happiness. All these specific goals, an artist, musician. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I'm telling you, I've compiled the answer on this specific question on how to be successful. And you better be an adaptability machine who sheds off the rules of society about what is right or wrong. You know what people said about Colonel Sanders? What do you think they said about him? He was 65, had no money. Everything he touched had failed. His last enterprise had been a hotel chain that he had built. And you know what happened to that hotel? It was thriving. It was making money. I think one of them caught on fire and burned down. And the other one, the state of Kentucky changed the freeway. So the freeway no longer drove, the main freeway no longer would go by his hotel. And so he lost most of his business. And a business that was doing very well suddenly went almost out of business. I think it went out of business. You see, as Megison says here, change is the basic law of nature. Change is the basic law of nature. Meaning if you can't keep up with that change, if you're black and white, hey, I got a successful business now, Ty. Says who? You know? Says who, sir? What if tomorrow the road changes? Many a business has been pulled out from people. Many a successful person. Look at sports. Boy, they're on top of the world. But you know what happens? I knew a guy when I used to own nightclubs in North Carolina from Duke. He got drafted by the Chicago Bulls, got a $10 or $50 million contract, but then was in a motorcycle accident. Boom, all taken away. Change is the law of life. Your body is changing. I was just reading Dr. Sharon Molam's book on inheritance, talking about how even your bone structure, osteoclasts and osteoblasts, are destroying your body skeleton and rebuilding it at a continual pace. Right? Everything is changeability. You and I, unfortunately, don't have microscopes in our house, but if we did, if you and I had more microscopes, and I recommend you get one, you start looking at things under a microscope, your own skin, you realize it's not static. Notice what Megison said here. He says, where does it say? Nothing involving human beings remains static. Nothing. And so the good news is if your failures, if they're moving you towards the end goal, who cares? Let me give you some practical examples. Let's say you want to lose weight. Try the Atkins diet. No black and white. People say, is the Atkins diet right or is it wrong? We already know the answer to that. I talked to Dr. Sharon Molam, best-selling author. I was just talking to him on the phone. You know, he's a medical doctor in New York, one of the most highly esteemed geneticists. And he says, Ty, it's all BS how we've seen diets, man. He said the reason you got people arguing about fruitarian, vegetarian, vegan, paleo, zone diet, so Atkins diet, is we don't understand that. The truth is everybody's genes are a bit different. He says I have some. He says the USDA puts out requirements that are based on the average person. You know, the average person should have 2 to 4 pieces of fruit a day. But he says, who's average? No one's average. On some things we're exceptional, and some things we're below. He said, I have patients that come into my hospital that are fructose intolerant, meaning if they have 1 piece of fruit, they'll be dead. So he said, the truth is, the best diet is the one that's adapted to your adaptable body. You see, this is the frontier in everything in physical health. This is the frontier in business. The guys who started WhatsApp, Brian Acton and his business partner, they originally started it, the guy who started Instagram, he originally started it as a app to like for an address contact book. But then he read the signs and he adapted and he saw that photos were better. He was not in love with his idea. He did not see his idea as black or white. This is the idea that came down from the skies in a golden tablet for me to follow. This is my destiny. He realized that his destiny was not static. And to the extent that he adapted and turned on a dime and pivoted, as they call it, in Silicon Valley. I just did a talk at London Business School, the #2 business school in the world after Harvard. And I talked on pivoting. I did the keynote talk there at the Entrepreneur Conference. This is being found daily to be more and more true. This mentality. You must erase the 500-year mentality. Now, I talked about ESS. What do I mean by ESS? If we eliminate black and white thinking, Ty, what will we be left with? Will the society fall into decay? Well, again, first of all, I'm not saying there's no black and white morality. We can, the basic structures of society, we pretty much know what those are. Thou shalt not murder, or thou shalt not steal. I mean, these things, I think, there's no reason to challenge those. I'm talking about your individual stepping stones. These are not black and white, okay? So don't get that. I hate when I get emails of people misunderstanding me. So I want to do a good job at explaining, not challenging your religious beliefs or your spiritual beliefs, not challenging what you believe happens to us after we die. I'm not challenging whether or not you believe Darwin understood everything and it's the full explanation for life. I am challenging you, though, if you think that success will be you at 22 years old, you at 32, you at 42, coming up with an idea in your sleep, you have a dream, you wake up, you go, this is what I'm going to do, it's going to go down exactly like this is who my business partner is going to be, this is who I'm going to raise capital from, I can tell you, you're on your path to doom and failure. But now if you say, I wake up today and I got a hypothesis that I'm going to experiment with, well then you are on the beginning path, because experiments should explain black and white understandings of things. Experiments. Thomas Edison, 1,100 or 1,000 or 1,100 patents. Each of those came from, let's say, a couple hundred or even 1,000 failed, quote unquote, I hate that word, failed experiment. I don't think you could have a failed experiment. An experiment is just an experiment. It's not supposed to even succeed. Even in a successful experiment doesn't mean it's real. Look at modern pharmaceutical drugs. Some drug they come out with, Lipitor or whatever drug. It's not like it's a success or failure, because with every drug comes a set of side effects. Just like the commercials say. You take this certain person takes this certain drug, they're dead of a side effect. Other people, it works very well. So life comes down to a set of experiments. And you formulate your own life, which is never static and it's continually going. Now, some people say, Ty, I don't like this. I need to, sink my teeth into one single thing. Well, you can do that in a sense. A big picture goal, you can decide, I want to be in the restaurant industry, or I want to be in the self-help business, or I want to be in the food business or the internet business. But within that broad industry, you're going to have tremendous change. Just like Steve Jobs launched, he sunk his teeth into one thing, right? He didn't have variability in everything in his life. I want to be in computers and design and technology. And he did, but over time he's developed and morphed and adapted to what people wanted. And sometimes he's pushing a Mac and sometimes laptop, and sometimes he's pushing a computer, and sometimes he's pushing an iPad and an iPod and an iPhone. And it's a continual adaptation, because he understood what Darwin saw when he met the blue-footed booby birds in the 1800s, right? He understood. Steve Jobs understood that. Now let's continue to go further through this, because as I said, people sometimes ask me, well, if we replace, this black and white understanding, this 500-year-old archaic, outdated mindset, what do we replace it with? Well, I alluded to some of it in the sense that you must begin to experiment. Everything you do has to be an experiment. This weekend I was going to Palm Springs, and I usually go to Palm Springs with just a couple people that I'd go on these business retreats. We'll talk about those. I don't talk about that as much in the 67 steps, but for those of you in some of my business training programs, I talk about the business retreat format. So, I go to Palm Springs, and this last time I went, I was like, maybe I'm going to bring a huge group, like 10 people. And my 500-year-old mind started setting in, going, well, what if you go there and you waste that weekend? Like, what if it doesn't work out? What if it's too many people? What? And then I said, Ty, snap out of it. Follow your own 67 steps that you compiled from all these great teachers, right? And I was like, Ty, that's the wrong way to think about it. There's no right or wrong about this. Bring the 10 people instead of 2 people. Experiment, see what happens. But if it doesn't get you the result that you like that you got from the 2 people, then turn on a dime, be adaptable, and change, and don't be stuck in your ways, and don't bring 10 people next time. Or if it's amazing and it's way better than the 2, bringing just 2 people, continue. Then try 20 people. Find the answers. Maybe the best is to bring 100 people with you. Maybe there's a critical mass effect, Ty. But you see, I was initially stifled, because back when I was in first grade just like you. Where class, they sat you down and they were like, oh, Ty, you didn't write your paper right. This is an F or this is an A. Look at him. What they're really teaching, and again, I'm not anti-school. I'm not anti-education system. I'm saying we must beware of some of the insidious, unknown side effects of the methodologies with which we teach children and with which we have been taught, and we got to go in and to the extent that there's falsity in there, you got to go in and remove it. Like Munger says, the self-made billionaire is like every night you must not go to bed a little bit smarter. Each night you must go to bed having removed one little piece of ignorance that you somehow picked up during your life. And this is one of those ignorance components that you and I have to just get rid of. It's horrible. So if we begin to replace the black and white archaic false mentalities from our brains, what do we bring in as a replacement? Well, I want to suggest a pretty cool, little bit tricky concept called ESS. Okay, Richard Dawkins, if you've read the book Selfish Gene, the biologist, he speaks on this. He's not the first person. I think ESS was really developed by another scientist. I forget his name. Axelrod. I actually think it wasn't Axelrod. There's a few people that worked on this in the 60s and 70s. And evolutionary stable strategies, ESS. This is not only what you and I should adopt as a new framework for understanding what we're doing on a day-to-day basis as we try to get our goals met, it already has in nature. This is not a new concept. This is how nature works. I'm staring out right now at a field of grass. And you know, grass developed not to be mown by a lawnmower, the blade of a lawnmower. Grass adapted and evolved over thousands of generations. Remember, grass has genes and DNA just like you and I. And cows, I grew up on a farm for some of my life. I lived 10 years basically on a farm, different farms, some of my own with my family, some that I had myself, some with the Amish, some with Joel Salatin, been to 51 countries, a lot of that agricultural studies, nature studies, learning from biology. And one thing that you learn about grass is grass kind of cut a deal with cows. Cows eat grass, and grass doesn't really like to be eaten, right? Now, grass is not alive like a human in that sense. It's alive, though, for sure. It's not exactly, at the level that we are, but it has a brain. It moves towards sun. It moves towards rewards. And if the wind blows and it's hard on it, the grass moves away from it. It moves away from pain, just like you and I. Grass is not that much different. And cows, of course, get pleasure from eating grass because they feel good, just like you and I when we eat a steak. And cows move away from the pain of having to scavenge the earth for food, so they eat what's most obviously in front of them, grass. They've evolved 4 stomachs. They're ruminants, cows are. And grass has basically, over the centuries and generations, cut a deal with cows. We'll let you eat us in exchange for you having bacteria in your saliva in the mouth of a cow that actually helps the grass heal. Isn't that interesting? I learned that when I was a teenager with Joel Salatin. A cow, cows don't really have teeth. They just have a tongue. And they grab the grass with their tongue and they eat it. And on their tongue, they have some, various bacteria, positive, good bacteria, and flora that help the grass regrow. That's an example of, a little example, it's not a perfect example, of an evolutionary stable strategy. Things cut deals with each other. You and I was reading Will Durant, the story of history, the lessons of history, and he's talking about capitalism versus socialism. And he says, very few places, in fact probably none, are truly fully capitalistic. And almost nowhere in the world is ever fully socialistic. Why do you think that is? Well, because it's not evolution, it's not an ESS. It's not a stable strategy, okay, to be extreme in that political case. So if you look at the United States, even though in many ways the United States is capitalistic, we have adopted various socialistic attributes. Now, I'm not saying whether that's good or bad. I don't like to get into politics. Everybody thinks they know what they're talking about. Hey, I'm not smart enough to really understand. In fact, Durant talks about that. No one mind has ever been good enough to understand and solve politically all the problems of a society. Maybe you're that one person, but I certainly am not. And so I'm not saying whether America's in the right place, or take China, China's a more communistic, socialistic place, but in many ways, China is more capitalistic than the Western world. You see, all places in the world strike balances. You see, there is no black and white. There will never be 100% communism or 100% socialism. There will never be 100% of pasture that only has cows and no grass. The cow knows if it doesn't help the grass regrow, the cow's going to be out of a buffet and going to be dead and of starvation. So the cow cuts a deal with the grass. We won't eat you too much, and you make sure to grow back so we can eat you. Now, it's not necessarily, there's something called anthropomorphism. I'm oversimplifying this. It's not like one cow literally cuts a deal with it, okay? The cow's not like, oh, hey, Mr. Grass. But if you look at the system that's developed over time between grass and cows, that's what's developed. Now, what's this have to do with you? What's the relevance? Well, very simple. You are going to have to cut deals with yourself and with other dynamics. And you're going to have to keep in mind what I call the Newton's third law. For every action, there is an opposite and equal reaction. Okay? For every action, there is an opposite and equal reaction. So the cow knows if it pushes too hard on the grass, what happens? Right? And my question for you is, as you look back throughout your life, have there been times where you were black and white about it? Maybe you had a business partner. Maybe you had a marriage. Maybe you had a diet you were following. And you forgot about ESS. You began to be obsessed with one piece of minutia. Now, in cognitive biases, Munger talks about these, Cialdini talks about these. It's absolutely vital, okay? It's absolutely vital that you not fall prey to the certainty bias. The certainty bias is one that selects something and fixates on it and sticks on it. Let's say you're married, or let's say you're in a business partnership and you think something should change. You're 50-50 partners and you think you should be 60 and they should be 40, or you're married and you think this person should pick up the kid, or you're dating someone and you think, whatever, they don't put the toilet seat down. Well, you can push on them. You can be black and white about it and say, this is wrong. You know all I've done for you? This is wrong. Just understand Newton's third law. Understand the changeability and adaptability that will happen. And when you push too hard on the other side, because you're using a 500-year-old archaic mind and saying things like, you should do this. No. What do you mean they should? Humans are innately selfish. You're probably in that relationship, as George Santayana says, love consists in 9/10 is in the the lover, and only 1/10 is in the object. What does that mean? It's like it's not a black and white business partnership. He or she wants something from you. That's why they're in business with you. Sure, there's altruism and friendships and all that, but if you get to the core and you peel back the layers of the human brain, if you don't believe me, read Elie Wiesel's book Night. The Nobel Prize winning a writer talks about his time in a concentration camp. Read that. Boy, those ties, those people you think who are even your family, boy, when times get tough, you'd be surprised what happens. You'd be surprised what happens. You see, every relationship you have, whether it be in business, friendship, love, there's an element not of black and whiteness to it, but of ESS. Evolutionary stable strategies. You need stability in your strategy. So, let's bring this all around into practicality. This is, I know, a hard thing to comprehend, but hey, you want to change your life? What answers do you expect me to bring to you? Simple ones? You think it's going to be so simple to change your life? Like the answers are, you see this in magazines. This is not Cosmo magazine. This is not GQ magazine where they come up with pithy, trite, shallow things. Oh, you want to change your life? Just be positive and visualize your success. That's not the answers to success. That's a sucker's game when people are trying to sell you a magazine. The truth that I'm bringing you, not because I'm smart, because I'm not. relative to the people that I'm bringing you this from. I'm just the compiler. And when you read, whether it be Professor Megison, whether you read Darwin, whether you read Edison, whether you read Charlie Munger, whether you read all of these great thinkers that we've been talking about, Dawkins, you will see a continual thread. They don't think like the masses. If you want results different than the masses, you can't think like the masses. And on this particular subject, we talked another one about being worth a damn, having the intangibles, having awareness. Well, this is, as we continue to progress, this is the next thing. I want you to start seeing things, everything you do, not in black and white, but as deals you're cutting with yourself and with somebody else or something else. You see, when Colonel Sanders was doing his experiments, which we call 12, 15 failed businesses. That's what society calls them, failed businesses. But hey, at the end, he seemed to have done pretty well. Started the largest franchise in the world. So it wasn't a failure, right? So they were just experiments. And what they were doing was creating an evolutionary stable strategy, meaning from each of these, he was grabbing a piece of knowledge, an energy, a direction, a bit of judgment, a bit of wisdom that was coming into his brain. So in exchange for the quote-unquote temporary failure, the loss of money, he was getting something back. You see, it was a deal that was being struck between the outside environment, his hotel chain that caught on fire, and himself. He had cut a deal. Of course, it was unknowing, probably. And the whole thing we're doing today is not doing this unknowingly. We're making a conscious effort to rewire our brain. So I want you to go out there. You must do this. It's not want. If you want big results from your life in any area, these 4 pillars of health, wealth, love, and happiness, the good life that we talk about, you're going to have to stop. And you're going to have to, when I say stop, you have to stop the things you've been doing. You're going to have to become more adaptable. You're going to have to read the signs. You're not going to see things black and white. You're not going to see things morally. Let's say you have a business partner and all of a sudden he's not working super hard or she's not working super hard and things begin to be unfair. Well, first step is be adaptable. Don't just sit there and let them put, for 2 years change the dynamic, right? That's not fair. That's, again, the definition of an ESS is evolutionary stable strategy. Means it's by the way, the technical definition is basically an environment that is not susceptible to outside invasion. It's stable enough that it can protect itself from outside forces. Now, again, in the long run, nothing's fully uninvadable, like the cows and grass. That's an invadable system in general. But for your life, it's a pretty resilient system. If you read Nassim Taleb, he talks about, he's the guy who wrote the Black Swan, Era of the Black Swan. He's the mathematician, and he wrote that book, Anti-Fragile. And this is somewhat related to what we're talking about. A little bit different. He's talking a little bit more about resiliency, and I'm talking more about adaptability, okay? So as you're going through this, and this business partner all of a sudden is not working very well, hard, and they were working before, you're going to be adaptable. You're not going to either flip out one day, which is what people are either at, either extreme. And like Munger says, avoid extreme ideologies, right? Some people, the day their business partner takes a vacation and they feel it's unfair, they feel like they're, offended. Remember the 4 laws of the 4 agreements, that best-selling book? One of them is don't take things personally. Taking things personally is back to the 500-year-old mind. I mean, some of it is ego and self-esteem. Some of it's healthy. Some of it's social strata, where you are in the social strata. But in general, it's this 500-year-old mind. It's like, oh, this person didn't show up today. We're 50-50 business partners. Why aren't they here helping me? So some people go to extremes. They'll flip out, get on the phone. Why aren't you here? We got 50-50. Other people will be pushovers. And that continual pattern will happen for a year. And after a year, they're like, hey, I've noticed for the last year, you haven't pulled your weight 50-50. Both of those extremes are not blue-footed booby bird adaptability. You don't want to adapt instantly, but you also don't need to wait a year to read the obvious signs. You can't be stubborn. Again, when you do come to begin to work on this issue, to change this dynamic, this strategy, this unstable strategy between you and your business partner, This could be in a marriage too. You don't need to come to them black and white either. You don't need to say, well, you know, what you're doing is wrong. You don't need to say what you're doing is wrong. Why is it wrong? There's a saying, I forget who it is. It's a great, like Rousseau or one of these great writers said, you know, even the most evil people are usually not as malicious as you think. So you come to your business partner, and instead of coming to them with the 500-year-old archaic black and white mind, like, hey, this isn't fair, right? The second you say that, you're drawing some moralistic thing that isn't. Just strike a new ESS with them. You don't need to be a pushover or a freak out person. You say, hey, I noticed you're not working out as, you know, I've been watching. I didn't want to say something right away, but I've noticed for the last like 2 weeks, you know, I'm doing most of the work. What's going on? Let's figure out, because I want this to be fair. Business partnerships need to be fair. I want it to be fair to you, and I want it to be fair to myself. Like Chief Tecumseh said, respect others in their view and demand they respect yours. So I respect your needing to be out there, but, you know, I want you to respect me too. This is a 50-50 street. What can we do? You see, the second you come with that mentality, that business partnership, if I was there as an advisor, I'd be like, that business partnership's going to survive. Remember, this is all about survival. Remember I said, Professor Megason, the changes wrought by the passions of time affect individuals and institutions. It's not the most intellectual of the species that survive. It's not the strongest, but it's the species that survives, that adapts. The best able to adapt and adjust to the changing environment in which it finds itself. We can say that the quote-unquote business, the quote-unquote marriage, the quote-unquote body that is able to survive is the one that is able to adapt to the changing physical, social, political, moral, and spiritual environment in which it finds itself. Nothing involving humans, beings, remains static. Your business partnership's not going to be static. Neither is your marriage. Adjust with it and strike a new ESS. Remember the cow and the grass. Be like, hey, I realize, and I did this in a business partnership. I was brought in, some guys wanted some outside advice, 2 partners weren't getting along as well. One wasn't working, one started working on another side business, and they were 50-50, and the one partner's like, hey, this isn't fair. Well, I told them they should have addressed it quicker because they waited too long, in the sense, you know, that one began to get mad and build up real deep-seated resentment. And I was like, why'd you wait 8 months to deal with this? Deal with this in 2 weeks. And we finally came to some new strategy. They used to be, they got 50-50 pay. I said, well, if one's working 80% of the time and one's working 20, cut a new fair deal. The guy who works more gets more paycheck. They can both own the same amount of shares, 50-50, but the paychecks can change. And then we're like, wow, why didn't we think of that? I'm like, I know why. Because you guys were so fixated on black and white. You were like, well, this isn't the original deal. This isn't right. I'm like, what do you mean right? There's not. What if he got hit by a car? Is that right? Of course it's not right. There's no right and wrong in these type of situations. What there is the understanding that nothing about human beings remains static. Nothing about businesses remains static. Nothing about your marriage, your friendships, your relationship, your body even. What used to work for you working out, let's think about your body. You know, I was talking to Ben Greenfield, best-selling author of Beyond Endurance, and a guy I coach him in business. And he's just named, you know, 100 most, or in the top 100 most influential people in the health space in the world. And I was saying, what would you do different? I interviewed, if you might have heard my podcast on iTunes, I put that, the talk that I did. It's an interesting interview. And he said, man, you know, I think I overworked my body. He's like a triathlete type person. It's like I should have rested more. But he was coming at it from a black and white perspective. He wasn't reading his own body. He was just saying, well, I read somewhere Arnold Schwarzenegger worked out 6 hours a day, so I'm going to work out 6 hours a day. He didn't follow Edison and adapt. He looked at it as right or wrong. He fell prey to certainty bias, like, Arnold Schwarzenegger did it, therefore I should do it. The USDA says I should eat 2 to 4 pieces of fruit. Even though every time I eat a piece of fruit, I feel like I'm going to die, I'm just going to keep doing it because there's black and white. It's right there on a piece of paper, 2 to 4. Well, like Dr. Sharon Molam says, what if you're fructose intolerant? You're going to be dead. You will kill yourself. In business, same thing. You will die. Remember? It's not the smartest. It's not the strongest. You can't bully your way through it. You can't always even think your way through it. You must adapt your way through it. Everything in life. You adapt and you come up with a new ESS. a new stable strategy. You must seek the stable strategy. Remember, it's not just enough, and that's why I added ESS. It's not enough to just continually adapt for no reason. Adaptation for no reason can be a complete waste of energy. I know people that take this to extremes and they're over adapting. They're changing too quickly. They're like, oh, I got a business partner. Day one, he didn't show up. He was sick. Ooh, I'm moving on to the next thing. That's over adaptation. It's not adaptation for the sake of adaptation. That's why I said what you want is ESS, a stable strategy. You're looking for the stability. When things change, try to find a new equilibrium. You can't adapt every single day per se. I mean, little things, right? But you eventually need to figure out the diet that works for your body, right? You need to figure out. You can do that through tests, find out if you're lactose intolerant, find out if you have food allergies. The technology is almost there, not completely there. I know some people working on patenting and getting some new technology out where you can just swab your saliva and get a good interpret. They know how to do that on the DNA level, the genetic level. The interpretations, Dr. Sharon Molam, are still not perfect. But over time, we're going to get better at that. So, and even that will change. My mom, for example, had no allergies till she moved to North Carolina and got around cats or something, and all of a sudden her body changed, and she couldn't go, well, I'm not allergic to cats. Let me keep cats here. No, I want you to become, and we're going to talk about this now, how you really implement this in your life. And the way to do this, all these things that I've thrown at you, ESS and adaptability and changeability, and not seeing things so black and white in every area. The way you're going to pull this off is by reading the obvious signs. And I can't tell you how hard this is in my own life. I can't tell you how hard this is going to be. It's going to be harder than you think. But remember, you're in this 67-day rewiring system, okay? My goal for you is by the time you're done with these 67 days, you've got the beginnings of new habits. And so for these days while you're in this program and doing these steps and doing these framework changes on your mind, you really got to consciously do it. And that is reading what's in front of you. I want you to start by just going in the mirror, okay, in the morning when no one's around. Take off all your clothes, stand there naked in front of a mirror. Read the obvious signs of your body. Do you look healthy? Do you look fit? Do you look stressed? Does your skin look fit? Start there with health. Everything you need to know, for the most part, is right there. So the beginning of being adaptable and changeable and thriving is just read what's in front of you. Don't project what you want to be. You know, I meet people and I see this where people are like, I'm beautiful. My body's perfect like it is. I'm like, that's black and white thinking. You know, you see people that are obviously out of shape, and they're like, and society's now teaching people, love you for you. Why? What rule is that? What black and white rule is that? I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm saying why? I challenge that rule. Why? Well, it makes people feel better. Well, why? Well, you know, they avoid the problem. Well, why is that good? Why? There's that old saying. You want to know the truth? Ask why 3 times. Now, you can probably be too extreme and too much a perfectionist on your body, and you can probably be not enough. It's not a stable strategy to be either one. Remember, I've given you the key. I haven't. I've found it in other great biologists like Dawkins and other, I think it's Axelrod. I should know this. Excuse me. I forget. Sometimes I read so much I lose track of the references, but I'll put it here in the reference. I think it's this Axelrod guy, but for sure Darwin Richard Dawkins talks a lot about this. No, strike an ESS with your body. Don't be black and white. Don't be an over-perfectionist. And if you're 70 years old listening to this, you're not going to have the body you had at 18 no matter what you do. But also, don't be unstable in your strategy and your approach to yourself, which is like, oh, everything's good. No, read the obvious signs and then adapt. If you do this, not today, maybe not tomorrow, but over time, the next thing you know, everything begins to change physically with your body. Try a new diet. Just try it. Try the Atkins diet. Do it for 3 months. I did one of my brothers was really into fruitarian diet. And I didn't think it made sense, and I read the research, but I'm going to try it. And I tried. I ate a lot of fruit. Man, I could not think straight like I normally could. So I'm like, and And a lot of fruitarians are very black and white, like it's the gospel of vegetarianism, the gospel of veganism, the gospel. I mean, it's so archaic and sad that this persistence in this way of seeing the world black and white is so pervasive. I don't want to point the finger at, we're not going to talk about where it came from. You could argue, some people would argue it's religion, some would say it's, hardwired into our brain. I'm not going to say that. Some could say it's a predatory meme in the brain. All I know is it's there and you have to get rid of it, and so do I. So try veganism. Joel Salatin used to say the best person to argue something is someone who's tried everything. Charlie Munger, the self-made billionaire, he's like, man, I don't believe you should be able to argue any side until you can argue the opposite better than they can. So if you're a vegan, or try paleo. And if you're paleo, try vegan. And be honest. Don't be black and white trying to prove a point. Don't be ego-driven in the sense. I'm not anti-ego, because the ego is an adapted purpose that serves many positive things, but don't be stuck in the certainty bias where it's like, no, I already decided a year ago that vegan is the way. No, this is the way, and I'll look too bad to go back. How can I go back? No, don't be a victim of the hardwiring, false hardwiring of your brain, because there's lots of it for all of us, the victims of our own brain. Our own brain didn't evolve and adapt always in our own best interest. If you read The Selfish Gene, Richard Dawkins and many other biologists are like, no, if we're not careful, we're just survival machines for the benefit of our genes. And our genes will do things that make us not happy and not fulfilled, and definitely will make us not healthy. Your genes will tell you, eat all the fat, sugar, and salt. I'm reading that book, or I got that book by the Pulitzer Prize winning author Michael Moss, Salt, Sugar, Fat. That book will change your life. And he says these big companies like McDonald's or Kentucky Fried Chicken or Coca-Cola, they know how to prey on the false hardwiring of your brain. It's not false in the sense of, it served a purpose 10,000 generations ago when there was no convenience stores and no big stores to go and get candy, to be very interested in sugar. In fact, hunter-gatherers are always interested in honey. It's their favorite food because they can never find it that much, so they found it once in a while. Who cares that they ate a whole bunch of honey once in a while? That extra glucose did them good. But today, in a world where we're full of sugar, salt, and fat everywhere, our brain is our worst enemy. People say, love me for me. I'm like, what do you mean? Don't love yourself for the bad parts. And again, see, even there I said bad. It's hard to communicate in English without using these 500-year-old words. Ineffective, I should say. That's ineffective thinking. The accurate way is to say, there's some things that need to be changed and adapted to bring an evolutionary stable eating strategy in the world. And that is the best we're going to get. So strike a deal with yourself and your body and your diet that's stable. Don't be so crazy with working out that you never do it. Set a longer goal. Peter Drucker, 18-month goal. If you set an 18-month goal, your body can change. I don't care how fat you are and out of weight. If you set an 18-day goal, you're probably not stable enough. That's not a stable strategy. Your metabolism is not meant to change that fast. It won't turn on a dime. But give yourself some time. Step by step you get ahead, but not necessarily in fast spurts. Famous saying, right? When it comes to wealth, you're trying to create wealth. That's part of the good life. You have to have enough money to be financially independent. Well, boy, you better be good in the modern world with 7 billion people potentially competing with you as an entrepreneur, or you as a business person, you in your career. You better read the signs. You better look, and you better be willing to adapt at a moment's notice. You read about huge layoffs, and people are like, I don't understand, this company wasn't loyal to me and I worked for them for 50 years. And some of that story I'm sure is true. There's people that are victims. But what is a victim? Everybody's a victim, right? At the end, we all die. So what happens often is you ask those people, well, didn't you notice that the factories you worked at or the job you did in the newspaper for the last 20 years, they've been talking about how that was being outsourced to China? Well, why haven't you been going to night school or reading a book and developing new skills? But because, as we know from the blue-footed Booby bird and Charles Darwin Origin of Species, it's not the most intellectual, it's not the strongest, it's the one that's best able to adapt and adjust to the changing environment in which it finds itself in business. Things change fast. And if you read the Everything Store by Jeff Bezos, why he did so well, and very well maybe one of the first $1 trillion companies in the world. Why? Because he was the king of adapting and changing. And it's interesting, his mentor in many ways, even though he didn't know him personally, was Sam Walton from Walmart. Because Sam Walton was a machine, never attached to his business ideas. If someone had a better idea, change. If he did an experiment, he was doing lots of experiments. If it failed, he didn't take it personally. You take things personally when you think of it black or white. Like, tie is a success if this experiment works. All my eggs are in that basket. That's the 500-year-old archaic mind. That's the same mindset that was putting people to the stake and burning them alive for saying the world, the planet Earth is not the center of the universe. That same methodology is still in you and I. That same false mentality, I should say, is still in you and I. Root it out. Start today. Stop looking at things so black and white. What you should have done if you worked in a career and you lost your job is you should have been like, you know what, let me strike this strategy I have at this job. I'm feeling the instability. It's unstable. I got to begin to develop a new stable strategy. What can I do to bring stability? So instead of black and white, what we're coming to a place of is I need stability. And to get to stability, it's almost an oxymoron. It's almost a dichotomy, and it's ironic. To get stability, you have to be willing to be unstable for a time while you're doing the adaptation. Most people aren't tough enough to go through that time where they adapt. Think about, we talked about money. Think about relationships, friendship, love. A lot of times people stay in relationships. Why? They know they're unstable. They read the obvious signs and they're with somebody that's clearly the wrong person for them. In business, people stay with stuff. I had a guy that I'm in my inner circle program. I have this inner circle for people that are, really wanting to grow $7 million business and stuff. And he stayed in a partnership for 18 months where he ended up making, or whatever, a couple years, where if you did the math backwards, he ended up making minimum wage. I was like, well, why didn't you go work at McDonald's then? That would have been a more stable strategy. He's like, well, I want to give it a chance. But I'm like, but it's obvious. It's not like you were moving forward closer and closer to your goal. Because remember, as you experiment, if for 2 years straight every experiment isn't bringing you any closer to your goal, you might want to rethink something. Even though Colonel Sanders, of course, is an extreme example where it was like 40 or 50 years of experimenting. That's pretty extreme. I don't recommend that. Even though he's a great story of redemption can come at the end. Hopefully, everyone listening to this doesn't want to wait till they're 75 to be successful in business, right? For the first time. So, in a relationship, you're seeing that signs. It's obvious there, right? But why are you still in that relationship? Well, I can tell you, you're not tough enough. You're driven too much by fear. You're not willing to go through that period of uncertainty when you're single. But you know what? If you're tough enough and you're going to become that person during the 67 days that we're working together, you're no longer going to fear that. We're going to talk about that in some other talks we do. Not fearing the grind, not fearing that time. Use that as an exciting time. Do things you couldn't normally do. If you have to be single and be unstable for a while, the certainty will come. Again, you will strike a stable strategy. You will find another relationship. It's better to go out and strike out on your own. Have courage, have fear. For those of you, make sure, of course, you're on my books site. You should be reading these biographies. Give you courage. You got to have courage to get through this stuff. And you have to have the courage to be willing to go through a little bit of uncertainty. Doesn't have to be long. Okay? But long enough that you can find a new ESS. Think of Walton. Think of this success that these people had. Right? Think of all the bad things that came in history from the 500-year-old archaic mind. Most of the injustices and the true injustices. I do believe that there are some black and white things. There's been great injustices done in history, and most of it comes from people just like you and I. They weren't necessarily evil. They just had a bad mindset. They didn't understand this principle, which you now know. You now have a higher responsibility. You must now say, I am a changing machine. There is no static. There is no stability in an unstable world. If you and I looked at ourselves under a microscope, the person you were when you started listening to this an hour ago or so, on a cellular level, is no longer the same person. You see, you are a new person. You can go further with this. Study quantum physics and how things change. We're just beginning to understand the new realities. Reality leads to new reality, which leads to new reality. At best, you and I are not going to find the black and white. We're not going to find the absolute perfect business partner. We're not going to find the absolute perfect business. There's no black and white like that. But we can find an ESS. We can find that stable strategy where that relationship in business, it's a good partnership. And as things change, you and your partner adapt and evolve and change the business. As new technologies come out, as new competitors come, you read the signs. You see what's going on. You stay abreast of the newest developments in your business, and you change. And the same with your body. What you eat today, which might be give you the results you want today, well, you could wake up one day and you're allergic to it. The body changes. You get older. Senescence kicks in. If you adapt this new way, it makes each day exciting. Each day is a new day. When you take on this, it's not a negative way of seeing the world. It's an exciting way. And it's the truth, or the closest that we know to the truth at this point in history. As so I want you to go out there. Evolve a new diet. Evolve a new exercise plan. There's no rules. I was the other day in my house, I was like, why do we have to sit? And you see this, people starting to develop stand-up desks. Yeah, it's adaptability, it's evolution of the workplace. 50 years ago, people were archaic, black and white. You have to sit in a chair. Why? Like I said, ask why 3 times. Why can't I stand up and type? Why can't I sit on a treadmill? I have a friend that walks 7 miles a day while he's on his computer. I've done a new thing where I put I have a garage, gym in my garage, part of my garage. I put an office in there. Why not? It's a new stable strategy. My goal is health. It's not black and white, what's better, sitting or not sitting. But if I want to be healthier, I want to lower my pulse rate. I've been trying to get my pulse, my natural resting pulse. They say if you can get it in the 50s, really healthy. I'm like, I know what I need to do to get to that. I mean, we pretty much know. I'm going to experiment with some things. I got to do some cardio. I got to be more active. Can't sit so much. And as I do it, I adapt. Let me try a bench press machine. Let me try sitting on a ball. Let me play basketball. Just experimenting like Edison over and over until I begin to strike a deal with my body. Yeah, this is working. Look in the mirror. Take your clothes off. Yeah, Ty, I like where this is going. But again, it's not black and white. It's not like, ooh, you don't look perfect. There's a little bit of love handles, or, oh, just love yourself for who you are. No, it's neither. Those are both archaic thoughts. The way to look at it is, I see the direction. This is going towards the goal. I feel the pulse rate. That's an objective measure. I see some other objective measures going. I'm liking it. I'm moving. Some days I'm falling behind, but it's okay. It's an 18-month goal. I'm moving. That's how you approach it. Whether it's your diet, your exercise, whether it's your business, it's the same thing. Hey, I'm trying, I've been working on a new business. Literally, it's been 12 months to the day. I invested in a business. First, some up and down. But we thought this one product would work. We launched it, didn't really see the results. People were excited about it, but didn't get raving reviews. Begin to change. 6 months trying different things. Nothing. Then kind of bumped upon it. And all of a sudden the feedback, you start getting testimonials from customers. Wow, this changed my life. Then you start building on that. Like Peter Drucker says, building upon strength, adaptability, building upon a strength, building upon the positive feedback, moving away from where people were complaining. Boom, adaptability, changeability. It's not the strongest or the smartest. That doesn't take a high IQ to do what I'm talking about. It doesn't take physical strength, but it takes a mentality that's always moving, changing, adapting. I want you to start doing that. I want you to do that with your friendships. With family, you might have family that you need to be closer with to get to your goals, or you need to move further away from. There's no black and white. Sure, family gets a better chance. Blood is thicker than water. I understand. I agree with that. But there's times. What if you could have a father who's a horrible person, a mass murderer, a criminal, sociopath, a psychopath. What are we going to advise that person? Of course, change, move away, adapt. Adapt, adapt, adapt. Some people in your family, you've neglected that relationship. You need to move closer towards them. Strike a better, more stable strategy. For some people that are friends now, the more stable strategy is not to see them as often. They're dragging you down. Or love, romantic relationships, same things. There's no black and whites, right? Sometimes husband or wife stay together and the relationship's horrible and they think it's because you have to stay together for the kids. Well, I talked to a top marriage counselor or a counselor for children, and she said, the best thing for kids, as far as we found in science, is two parents who love each other and get along in a very functional relationship. Two parents and a child. But they said, but I said, what happens if one of the parents is a horrible person, in the sense of a horrible parent moving towards their kids towards a goal that people don't want, like an alcoholic parent who's probably teaching that kid to be addicted to things and teaching that kid unstable strategies for life. Well, she said, well, then it's better for the parents to separate. That'll be a better outcome, most likely, in the sense of that kid having habits that you probably want a kid to have. Okay? So black and white, it's not like, oh, I stay with this person through thick or thin. Well, no, there's things humans can do to you. That means you distance yourself from them, period. I lived with the Amish for 2.5 years. They don't believe in divorce, but they do believe in separation. So part of their religion, their Christianity, is death to us part, and I respect that. They're Christians, and that they take a very strict interpret. I respect that, but even they adapt. If a husband's beating up a wife, or a wife's hitting the husband over the head with a pan, they can move out, right? They, for the Amish, they don't believe you should remarry. If you're an atheist listening to this, you have no qualms about this. But the end game is the same. You distance yourself and create a stable strategy. So if you're in a love relationship now that's not healthy, or let's say you're single and you can't get anybody to date you, well, you probably got to adapt your personality. People are like, I want people to love me for me. Well, maybe your mom will love you for you, but I guarantee you somebody who's not genetically related to you is going to love you for the stable strategy, meaning give and take. You bring some things to their life that they didn't have, and they bring some things to your life. No one's going to love you unconditionally that never met you before. You walk down to Starbucks, see a girl or a guy you think's attractive, walk up to him, they're going to, what are you going to say? Love me for me. They don't even know you. You better bring something to the table. So if you're not bringing enough to the table, which is generally what happens when you're not getting relationships that you want, time to step it up after listening to this. Adapt. Experiment with more. Try being more outgoing. Try being more reserved. Try being kinder. Try being a little less kind. Try being more social. Try being a little less social till you get the stable outcome that you want. Happiness, fulfillment, the final pillar. Same thing. What are the things keeping you from fulfillment? Why don't you tap dance out of bed? Is it because of the job you have? Is it because of the person you're married to? Is it because of the situation with kids? Adapt. Adapt, my friend. That's all you have in life. Stop pointing fingers and saying black and white. Well, it's them. They're black and white. It is no black and white, man. I guarantee you're doing some stuff that brings the stability, and probably they are too. Maybe get closer. Maybe get further. Maybe quit. Maybe ask for a promotion. Maybe ask for a demotion. Be like, you know what? I'm not doing a good job at this job. I want you to demote me. I want to get paid less, and I want to earn it again. And you're going to so impress your boss, they're going to be like, wow. And you're going to go into a new stable strategy with your boss. The outcome of that a year later might be you're a business partner. Anybody honest enough to see themselves through that accurate of lenses is going to be respected. You see, stability. There is no, oh, I've worked at this company for 5 years, so I should be moving up. Why? Why do you have to move up after 5 years? You could maybe move down after 5 years. Why does it have to take 5 years? If you're amazing, you could move up to be, if I meet somebody and they're amazing enough, I'll make them a business partner in a week. Maybe not a week. Let me take that back. 6 months. There's no rule with me. There's just stable strategies as I read the obvious signs and I do my experiments. You don't like the happiness? Well, you're probably not happy because your brain is not in an ESS state. Your brain knows. You can't fool your brain. Dr. Jonathan Haidt, I was talking to him on the phone, did 3 TED Talks on happiness. He's a professor at NYU. He talks about, there's some things that you can't strike a stability with in happiness. If you hate the boss you're around, the hate person you're married to, if you live in a loud house These are things that your brain will never be able to ignore. You will be unhappy. Adapt, experiment, find stability with a new non-black and white strategy that will continually adapt with you until you wake up one day and you're like, I'm liking where I'm going. This is feeling like I'm getting towards my goal. If your goal is fulfillment, all right, I'm feeling a little more fulfilled today. All right, set an 18-month goal. This is what this is all about. So I hope this has been helpful. I want you to answer this, and to complete this, you must do this, please. Not because I like to do this as busy work, because this will help you. What is the number one area in your life where you have been stubborn, where you have been too black and white and had the 500-year-old archaic mind, where you have not evolved and changed as quickly as you should? What is that one particular area? Pick a specific instance and write it here, and write out one experiment that you're going to start changing that situation by doing. So for some of you, it could be you've been stuck on being a vegetarian, or stuck on being paleo, or stuck on the zone diet, or for your body, or you've been stuck just going to the gym, but your body's not really changing, but you still go to the gym every day, but you're stuck. Where have you not adapted enough? And what's your next experiment? Maybe your experiment is you're not going to go to the gym. You're going to go jogging. Or maybe you've been jogging and your joints hurt. You've been ignoring it and keep jogging, but now you're going to try something else like swimming. That's not so hard on the joints. You're reading the signs of your body. Maybe for some of you, the answer to that question is in wealth, right? Your wealth, you're going to be like, oh, well, I've been stuck in this business 20 years and it's not doing anything. Well, maybe you don't need to quit that business. Maybe you need to evolve a new product. Maybe you need to go out, spend some time with the competitors, researching, not seeing it black and white, competitors bad, I'm good, going, hey, is there some stability? Maybe you need to broker a deal with them. That's what Jeff Bezos did at Amazon. He saw other bookstores selling, and he said, why don't I just let them sell on my store? He built the third-party marketplace, and he made a ton of money on commissions off other people's things. I want you to take that. Love, same way. Maybe you need to write out. Maybe there's a relationship you need to go deeper in or move away from. What's your next step? What's your experiment? Write it here on this page to complete this step, okay? On the worksheet, write this out. On your journal, remember we're doing this journal. Print out a worksheet that we provided. If you can't find it, get a piece of paper. Write the answer, put it in your 3-ring binder. That 3-ring binder needs to be on your shelf for the next 20 years. It'll remind you. You'll continually do this. You can do this 67 steps program again. Come back through. And lastly, the 4th pillar, health, happiness, fulfillment. That might be an issue. What's keeping you from being fulfilled? What do you need to move away from? What do you need to strike an ESS stable strategy with? What experiments do you need to do? Write one of them down. All right, put this in your journal. This is absolutely foundational. If you have any questions, email me on the site in the private inbox. You can hit me at Twitter at Ty Lopez, Facebook. The best is this private inbox on the site. But leave the comment here and the question and answer on this page on my site, so I can read it, review it. It's helpful. Power of intention. You put it out there, and then make sure you write it with a pen and paper in your 3-ring binder that you should have. Your journal, your success journal, this 67 steps journal. All right. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon.